The alien princess mocked him before all, but the human made sure she learned respect. The throne room of Veylar Prime shimmered like a cathedral of glass and silver. Hundreds of courtiers, advisors, and guards filled the vast chamber, their alien voices a low murmur that rippled against the crystalline walls. Humans had been invited here only recently, and most were looked upon with suspicion. John Mercer stood tall at the center of it all, his boots clicking against the polished floor as he was led forward by two armored guards. He was no diplomat, no decorated general, just a mechanic who had been chosen to accompany Earth's ambassador because of his uncanny knack for fixing alien technology. At the far end of the chamber sat Princess Serenia, daughter of the Veylar Emperor. Draped in silken robes that caught the light like liquid fire, she lounged on her throne, her violet eyes sharp with amusement. She leaned toward her handmaidens and whispered something. A ripple of laughter followed. "Human," Serenia said at last, her voice carrying like music but lined with venom. "Tell me, is it true your people crawl in mud for food? That you must scavenge like vermin when your crops fail?" The chamber erupted with mocking laughter. John felt the heat rise in his chest. He wasn't unused to mockery. He'd been a nobody back home, often dismissed by men of higher station, but to hear an entire hall laugh at humanity's expense struck deep. He could have bowed his head and let it pass. That was what most expected. But John had never been one to bow easily. "No," he said calmly, his voice steady. "When our crops fail, Princess, we find another way. We endure storms, droughts, even the endless silence of space. We don't wait for someone else to rescue us. We fight. We survive." The chamber quieted, but Serenia's lips curved into a cruel smile. "How quaint," she said. "You speak of survival as if it were nobility. But endurance alone is not greatness. It is desperation." Her words cut, but John didn't falter. He looked her square in the eyes. "Respect doesn't come from titles or silks, Your Highness. It's earned. And sometimes learned the hard way." The court gasped at his audacity. Speaking so directly to the princess was unthinkable. Guards shifted, ready to drag him away. But Serenia raised a hand, halting them. A spark lit her eyes, half anger, half intrigue. "Very well, human," she said, rising from her throne with a dancer's grace. "You speak boldly. Let us see if your actions match your words." A trial. The courtyard of the palace was transformed within hours. Courtiers gathered along balconies and terraces, eager to watch the spectacle. At its center lay a series of intricate mechanical constructs, training machines used by the Veylar for combat drills. Serenia herself stood at the far end, armed with a gleaming staff of crystalline alloy. "You will face me," she declared. "If you can endure as you claim, then perhaps you are worth listening to." John had no weapon, no training in alien combat. But retreat was not an option. He stepped forward, his jaw set. The first strike came fast. Serenia's staff hummed through the air, crashing toward him with a burst of sparks. John barely ducked, the heat of its energy singing his hair. He rolled, stumbled, and scrambled back to his feet. Laughter echoed from the balconies. "Pathetic," Serenia taunted, her strikes flowing like fire. But John did not answer with words. He watched. He learned. Every swing had a rhythm, every motion a flaw. When she spun for a downward strike, he caught the shaft with both hands, the force nearly breaking his arms. He gritted his teeth, refusing to let go. The courtiers leaned forward. With a twist, he wrenched the staff sideways, using her momentum against her. Serenia stumbled, her eyes flashing with fury. He didn't press the attack, He simply tossed the weapon aside and stood tall, breathing hard. "I don't need to beat you, princess," John said, his voice raw but steady. "I just need to show you that humans don't break as easily as you think." The silence was deafening. Serenia's face burned with humiliation, but beneath the anger, something shifted. She had expected a coward, someone who would fold beneath pressure. Instead, she saw a man who stood firm despite overwhelming odds. She retrieved her staff slowly, her chest rising and falling. At last she inclined her head. Barely, but enough that the court gasped again. "You are stubborn," she admitted. Her voice lacked the mockery it once carried. "Perhaps there is merit in that." John gave a small nod. "Stubbornness kept us alive when we had nothing else. If that makes us vermin in your eyes, then so be it. But never mistake endurance for weakness." That night, whispers spread through the palace like wildfire. The human who had stood against the princess, the one who had not cowered, had earned more than ridicule. He had earned respect. Serenia, though still proud, began to watch John with new eyes. He had forced her to confront her arrogance not with cruelty, but with unshakable resolve. It was a lesson she could not ignore. As John left the chamber, the courtiers parted, no longer laughing. Some even bowed their heads slightly. Humanity, through one ordinary man, had taken its first step toward respect among the stars. And Princess Serenia, though she would never admit it aloud, had been changed forever. The courtyard fell into silence. John stood there, sweat dripping, chest heaving, but his gaze never wavering. Serenia's crystalline staff lay at his feet, where he had thrown it aside instead of using it against her. "I don't need to defeat you," John said, his voice carrying across the balconies. "I only need to show you, humans endure. We don't bow because others demand it. We bow only when respect is earned." The courtiers, who had been laughing moments before, were now still, their alien eyes fixed on him. Some shifted uncomfortably, others whispered to each other. But none dared laugh. Serenia's face flushed with anger, then slowly softened into something else, realization. She bent, lifted her staff, and for the first time in her life, lowered her head ever so slightly toward another being. The crowd gasped. "You are stubborn, human," she admitted, her voice quiet but clear. "And stubbornness, I see now, is not weakness. It is strength." John gave a faint nod. "Then perhaps we understand each other." When he left the courtyard, the court did not jeer or mock. They stepped aside. Some even bowed their heads in quiet acknowledgement. Word spread swiftly through the palace. The human had not only faced the princess, he had made her bend to respect. That night, Serenia stood at her balcony, watching the stars glitter above her empire. For the first time, she thought of humanity not as mud crawlers, but as survivors, unyielding, impossible to break. And deep within, she knew she would never forget the man who had taught her that lesson.